Welcome to Military Matrix. In the grand theater of military analysis, certain scenarios capture the imagination, evoking classic tales of underdog versus hegemon, of David versus Goliath. One such scenario, often debated in online forums and strategic circles, is the hypothetical confrontation between a legacy fighter jet, the F-16 Fighting Falcon in the hands of the Venezuelan Air Force, and the ultimate symbol of American sea power, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. The image is potent, a sleek, aging jet screaming towards a floating city of steel and firepower. It's a compelling narrative. However, as we peel back the layers of this scenario on today's date, we find that the reality is less a dramatic duel and more a clinical case study in the overwhelming nature of modern, integrated, multi-domain warfare. This is not a story about one aircraft versus one ship. It is the story of a handful of isolated, technologically frozen platforms facing an entire sentient, networked military ecosystem designed for one purpose: to dominate the battle space from the ocean floor to low Earth orbit. To truly understand the outcome of such a confrontation, we must first dissect the challenger, the Venezuelan F-16. In the early 1980 seconds, under the Peace Delta Foreign Military Sales Program, Venezuela became one of the first Latin American nations to operate the F-16, a move that solidified its position as a formidable regional air power. The aircraft they received, the F-16 Ampers and F-16B Block 15 variants, were at that time state-of-the-art. They represented a leap in fighter technology, with fly-by-wire controls, a powerful engine, and a versatile air-to-air and air-to-ground capability. For years, these jets, nicknamed Vipers, were the pride of the Fuerza Aérea Venezolana, flown by well-trained pilots who frequently exercised with their American counterparts. However, the passage of 4 decades has been profoundly unkind to this fleet. The story of Venezuela's Vipers is a chronicle of slow, systemic decay. The political schism between Caracas and Washington, particularly over the last 25 years, led to a comprehensive arms embargo. This embargo severed the vital lifeline of spare parts, technical support, and software upgrades from Lockheed Martin and the U.S. government. For a sophisticated machine like the F-16, this is a death sentence. Modern military aviation relies on a constant stream of maintenance, component replacement, and system modernization to remain effective. Without it, readiness plummets. By 2025, the Venezuelan F-16 fleet is a shadow of its former self. Of the original 24 airframes, it is estimated that only a small fraction, perhaps a dozen or even fewer, remain in a flyable condition. Even this assessment may be optimistic. Keeping these jets in the air has become an exercise in cannibalization, where parts from one grounded aircraft are stripped to keep another flying for just a little longer. The complex avionics, the powerful Pratt & Whitney F-100 engine, and the delicate fly-by-wire systems all require specialized maintenance that is simply no longer available. The operational readiness rate is, by any professional military standard, abysmal. Beyond the physical state of the airframes is the critical human element. Pilot proficiency is a perishable skill. It is maintained only through constant, rigorous training, measured in annual flight hours. While a NATO pilot is expected to fly between 180 and 240 hours per year to maintain combat readiness, it is highly likely that Venezuelan F-16 pilots are logging a mere fraction of that due to the scarcity of serviceable aircraft and fuel. Their training is likely confined to basic flight maneuvers, lacking the complex, large force exercises and simulated engagements against modern threats that are standard practice for U.S. Navy aviators. The technology within the cockpit tells a similar story of stagnation. The Venezuelan F-16 seconds still operate the original AN divided by APG-66 pulse Doppler radar. In the 1980 seconds, this was a capable system. But in the context of 2025, it is an antique. Its detection range against other fighter-sized targets is limited, perhaps 80 to 100 kilometers under ideal conditions. More critically, it is a product of an analog era, making it exquisitely vulnerable to the sophisticated digital electronic warfare and jamming techniques that are now commonplace. Against a dedicated electronic attack platform, this radar would be rendered useless, its screen dissolving into a blizzard of static. Finally, and perhaps most decisively, there is the question of weaponry. To pose a credible threat to a warship, an aircraft needs a modern, long-range, precision-guided anti-ship missile. Due to the embargo, Venezuela never received advanced munitions like the Harpoon missile from the United States. While they have acquired other weapon systems from sources like Russia and China, integrating them onto the F-16 specific U.S. standard architecture is a monumental technical challenge, likely beyond their capabilities. Therefore, any hypothetical attack would probably have to be conducted with unguided dumb bombs or rockets. This would force the F-16 seconds to fly directly over or very near their target, deep within the densest layers of the carrier's defenses, a suicidal proposition. Now, let us turn our attention to the behemoth, the target of this hypothetical challenge. To refer to it as merely an aircraft carrier is a profound misnomer. The correct unit of analysis is the Carrier Strike Group, or CSG. This is a multi-billion-dollar formation of naval power, a sovereign territory of the United States at sea, and it is arguably the most formidable concentration of military force ever created. It is a fortress, but a mobile, intelligent, and lethal one, built upon a philosophy of layered defense, or defense in depth. An attack on a CSG is not an attempt to breach a single wall, but to survive a journey through concentric rings of escalating lethality, each designed to detect, disrupt, and destroy threats long before they can pose a danger. The battle begins hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers away, in the silent realms of space and intelligence. A network of satellites and long-range surveillance assets provides the CSG commander with persistent situational awareness, tracking air and surface contacts across an entire region. Any potential threat is identified and monitored long before it even considers launching an attack. The first physical layer of the CSG's defense is its eye in the sky, the Northrop Grumman E-2D Advanced Hawkeye. Flying high above the fleet, the E-2D is a flying command and control center. Its massive rotating dorsal rotodome houses the AN divided by APY-9 radar, a system so powerful it can detect not only conventional aircraft but also low observable, stealthy targets against the clutter of the sea's surface. From its perch at 30,000 feet, a single Hawkeye can monitor millions of cubic miles of airspace. The Venezuelan F-16 seconds, with their 1,980 seconds era radar cross-sections, would appear as bright, unambiguous tracks on the E-2D screens from a distance of over 450 kilometers. At this range, the Venezuelan pilots would have no indication whatsoever that they have been detected. The E-2D's crew would classify the contacts, assess their intent, and, through a high-bandwidth data link, share this precise targeting information with every other asset in the strike group. The element of surprise is not just lost, it is rendered conceptually impossible. With the threat detected, the second layer swings into action. This is the realm of the invisible warrior, the ghost in the machine, the EA-18G Growler electronic attack aircraft. The Growler is a derivative of the F/A-18 Super Hornet, but its mission is not kinetic. It does not primarily seek to shoot down enemy planes. Its purpose is to dominate the electromagnetic spectrum. Using its suite of powerful jamming pods, including the next-generation jammer, the Growler can unleash a focused barrage of electromagnetic energy. This energy blinds enemy radars, severs their communication links, and disrupts their data networks. As the Venezuelan F-16 seconds press onward, their pilots would experience a bewildering sensory deprivation. Their radar screens would flicker and die. The reassuring voice of their wingmen and ground controllers would vanish into a sea of static. They would become isolated, blind, and deaf, flying alone into a perfectly coordinated defense. This electronic assault paves the way for the third layer, the long lance of the fleet, the Carrier Air Wings fighter screen. The CSG would launch its primary interceptors, the F/A, 18E/F, Super Hornets, and if deployed, the F-35C Lightning II. These aircraft represent a quantum leap in capability over the legacy F-16. They are equipped with advanced active electronically scanned array AESA radars, which are far more powerful, resilient to jamming, and capable of tracking multiple targets with pinpoint accuracy. Guided by the data feed from the E-2D Hawkeye, these pilots would have a god's eye view of the battle space. They would know the precise location, altitude, and heading of the F-16 seconds long before their own jets could be detected. The engagement would be brutally efficient and impersonal. From a distance well beyond visual range, likely over 120 kilometers, the U.S. pilots would launch their primary weapon, the AIM-120D AMRAAM missile. This is a sophisticated fire-and-forget weapon with its own active radar seeker. Once launched, it flies autonomously to the target. For the Venezuelan pilot, whose radar is jammed and who has no modern missile approach warning system, the first and only indication of the attack would be the catastrophic explosion of their aircraft. The fight would be over before it ever truly began, a silent, remote execution conducted from a distance. But let us entertain the improbable. Let us imagine that through some miracle, a single F-16 survives this onslaught and manages to get within range to launch a hypothetical weapon. This is where the fourth and fifth layers of the fortress come into play. The carrier itself is surrounded by a shield of escort warships, typically one Ticonderoga-class cruiser and several Arleigh Burke-class destroyers. These vessels are floating arsenals, and their heart is the Aegis combat system. Aegis integrates the ship's powerful SPY-1 or SPY-6 radar with its vertical launch missile systems, creating a dome of protective firepower around the fleet. The instant an incoming missile is detected, the Aegis system would automatically track it and launch interceptors like the SM-2 or the incredibly agile SM-6 to destroy it mid-flight, dozens of kilometers away from the ships. Should even this layer fail, the final wall of defense activates. This is the point defense layer. Ships would fire the RIM-162 Evolved Sea Sparrow missile, ESSM, a highly maneuverable missile designed to intercept supersonic sea-skimming threats. And as a last resort, the Phalanx Close-In Weapon System, CIWS, would spring to life. A radar-guided 20mm Gatling gun, the CIWS can fire 4,500 rounds per minute, creating a final impenetrable wall of tungsten projectiles to shred anything that gets too close. In conclusion, the scenario of a Venezuelan F-16 challenging a U.S. carrier strike group is a profound mismatch across every conceivable metric. It is a confrontation between a relic of the Cold War and a fully realized 21st century integrated warfighting network. The decisive factors are not merely the specifications of the aircraft, but the immense, often invisible systems that support them. It is the gap in situational awareness provided by the E-2D, the crippling effect of the EA-18G's electronic warfare, the technological supremacy of the Super Hornet and F-35C, the impenetrable missile shield of the Aegis escorts, and, overarching all of it, the vast chasm in training, doctrine, logistics, and real-world experience. The battle would be won not in a swirling dogfight over the Caribbean, but in the quiet, climate-controlled combat information centers of the fleet by operators processing data from a global network of sensors, long before the F-16 seconds ever cross the horizon. This hypothetical clash serves as a stark and unequivocal lesson. In modern warfare, the platform is secondary to the network, and the strength of a nation's military power lies not in any single piece of hardware, but in its ability to fuse technology, information, and highly trained personnel into a seamless, cohesive, and utterly overwhelming whole.